Hello, our Axis and allies loves. It's 1914 World War I, Wars of the World, straight from the nest. NATO's going to take it away.
Hi Axis and Allies players, welcome back to the nest. It's the end of the 1914 scenario, not to include the little bits that are going to come after that. A couple of things that are going on here. You guys can see that I've got some stuff going on. No big deal. No worries. I'm fine. It's just some checkups and things like that. We'll go into some more of that maybe later. I don't know yet. When we started this channel, we started it literally a week after I had major surgery. So we're going to keep just going with that because, you know, it's us and, you know, the game isn't going to wait for us, or maybe it will. Second, we are not going to go to Egypt. I found out that it was $14,000 just for us to show up. I had a mild heart attack and then said no. So that's not happening, but no worries, we are still planning on a couple of trips. So that's going to take precedence over some other things. Now, it's the end of the game and I have the final outcomes of what's going on. It's one of our games, so it's a nail biter. It's last roll of the die. It's the you got one shot and you better take it for everything it's worth. So that's what happened. Austria took out the Mediterranean fleet of the Italians. Didn't give them a victory point, just the pride that they took out the fleet in the Mediterranean. Germany. When Germany started, the Entente were actually winning 10-9. So Germany did what it does and they come out of the Baltics, they take on the British blockade, destroyed it, took the victory point for it, and now it's tied up 9-9. So, or takes away the British victory point. Then they attacked Baccardia. They did not completely take Baccardia, but they did reduce the British down to 1 infantry. Then they attacked Lorraine, drove the French out of Lorraine into Paris, take the victory point away from France, and that brought them up 10-9. England decided that they were going to do an amphibious landing to try to liberate Belgium. That also did not work. Germany was left with 1 infantry with boots on the ground and kept Belgium. And it was last roll of the die, and the British missed. England and Anzac, however, decided to team up and they invaded. England came up from Cairo and the Anzac took an amphibious landing into Palestine. Barely, last roll of the die, they took Palestine and now the score is 10-10. France decided to ratify and not ratify, but more take on the Austrian fleet in the Mediterranean and destroyed them to make up for Italians' huge loss on that. The Ottomans attempted to retake Palestine. Not a chance. That did not happen. The Italians tried to push Austria out of northern Italy and reduce them down to 1 fighter. They were not successful. And then America comes into play. So America decides to counterattack into Baccardia. They succeed and they push the Germans out of Baccardia. And then the fleet, the American fleet moved into the Danish Straits. And because they were able to destroy that high seas German fleet, they were able to take the victory 11-10. So again, very well balanced game, very well balanced playthrough. For the parts that I was here to play, because I have been out of town a lot over the past month, it would have turned out either way even if I was here, because I play exactly like Nato, and in some cases he plays better than I do, I play better than he does. Either way, we both play a hell of a game and we try to keep it as balanced as this. So keep those nail biting going. Coming up next is the finalization of that video from Nato, so he can give you guys the roundabout what's going on. Thank you for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Like it, live it, love it. We'll see you next time right here on The Nest.
Hello everybody, this is Nato at the Nest with the fall of the 1918 turn and the last turn of World War I, and it was one hell of a turn. The last 6 months of the war saw the return of maneuver warfare to the Western Front. The front lines changed fairly significantly. So, starting with the Austrians, the Austrians decided to take their fleet and bring it out of harbor and attack the Italian fleet off the west coast of Italy. And they managed to sink the Italian fleet and had a damaged battleship left over. And then and unfortunately that was Austria's only success this turn. Austria attacked northern Italy again as a last-ditch effort to drive them out and get a victory point. But it was not to be. The Italians held strong and kept the Austrians out. Then the Germans had the greatest success of the Central Powers. The Germans, they bombed London again with their Zeppelins, did 8 points of damage. Then did 2 points of damage on the Northern Atlantic convoy line, and then 4 on the Southern. And then they made an all-out assault on the Western Front again. They attacked the British in Picardia and once again almost broke through. They reduced the British down to a single infantry, but just couldn't quite keep the cohesion together long enough to punch through. However, they did break through Lorraine. They drove the British out of Lorraine and took Lorraine, so the Germans were on Paris's doorstep, but unfortunately that was the last round, so the war is over, so they won't be able to attack Paris. But even if they could, the likelihood of them getting Paris is pretty slim, because the French are going to have those 4 infantry coming back from being wounded, and then the French have all that sitting in Paris. 6 infantry, 2 artillery, a tank, a fighter, 3 American tanks, and 3 American fighters. So they won't be able to take Paris, at least not quickly. And then once we get to the British and American turns, you'll see why, even if they could attack Paris, events elsewhere would dictate them pulling back so they don't get encircled. Let's see. And that was, I believe that was it for, oh, no it wasn't. The German fleet, the Baltic fleet, sailed out and to challenge the British fleet in the Danish Straits, and also it was implementing the blockade. And they managed to defeat the British fleet. They lost 2 cruisers and they had 3 damaged battleships. And so very briefly, the Entente blockade on Germany was lifted. See, then the Soviets, they moved north from Belorussia and Kursk and attacked the White Russians in Smolensk and threatened the factory. Weren't able to take it, only contest it. And then they pulled back from the North Caucasia, citing that the position was unattainable, outnumbered 2 to 1, so they pulled back to even the odds because militia can't move. Okay, so now to the British and what I was just briefly talking about. The British, they gathered their forces in London and made an amphibious landing in Belgium, and they damn near took it. The only thing Germany has left in Belgium is that single infantry. and the wounded, but damn near were thrown out of Belgium with only a single infantry left. And then the British destroyers managed to sink the last German submarine on the North Atlantic line, so the North Atlantic convoy line is now clear. And then the big news is the British, and working in conjunction with Anzac forces, remember that Anzac army, that fleet, the British moved up from Cairo while the Anzacs made an amphibious landing, and they took Palestine from the Ottomans. Let's see, that was it for British action. England, the first carrier in history, is now on the board. It's not a fleet carrier. Carrier technology is still fairly primitive, so it's a small carrier, can only hold one fighter. And the British completed advanced fighters last turn, so they put out their first advanced fighter. And you might be wondering, well, so what? You know, it's the last turn, but it's the last turn for World War I, but the scenario's not over. The Russian Civil War is still going on, and next turn Ireland will flare up in rebellion again. And also because, and then Ukraine and the Soviets will duke it out. And possibly Poland, depending on if the Central Entente powers won. So not to be an asshole about it, but I'm going to wait till the end of the video to tell who won or not. And then France. France didn't counterattack Lorraine because even with all that, they wouldn't have the American support. So France attacked. They didn't really. There was no chance of them defeating all those German units in one roll of the dice. So France just stayed put. However, France did have a success in Africa. France took German Cameroon, and so gobbled up the last German overseas colony. So that was France's victory for the turn. So like I said, the war maneuver has finally returned to the war. Fortunately, it's only the last 6 months, but granted that was fairly historical. But anyways, Russia, or the White Russians, because of the Soviet threat to one of only 2 factories remaining, that forced the Russians to pull back from Petrograd to reinforce and attempt to drive the Soviets out of Smolensk, and they're unable to do so. Although they have the numerical advantage right now, so we'll see how that develops. And then Ukraine, saving up money, is able to put out another infantry. Then the Ottomans. The Ottomans, they took their forces in Bulgaria and joined them with their forces in Greece and made another attempt to drive the British out of Greece, and they're ultimately unsuccessful. And just because it was the last turn, and why not, the Ottomans took their last remaining cruiser in the Black Sea and tried to attack the Anzac fleet in the Mediterranean, and as you can see, that didn't go so well. The Anzacs sunk the Ottoman cruiser with no losses on their own. And then the Ottomans took everything that was in range and threw it at Palestine in a last-ditch effort to drive the British and Commonwealth forces out of Palestine to deny the British that victory point, but unfortunately were unsuccessful. And that was it for the Central Powers. Italy, oh sorry, and France also avenged the Italian fleet and destroyed the Austrian battleship and the Austrian transport. So French avenged the Italian fleet by wiping out the Austrian fleet with no losses to their own. The Italians went on an all-out attack on the Austrians to try to drive them out of northern Italy. And as you can see, they damn near succeeded. There's only one infantry and one fighter left for the Austrian forces in northern Italy, so almost drove them out. And then Japan, well, they did nothing because there's nothing in the Pacific for them to do. There's no point in them leasing to anybody because, you know, this is the last turn. So we just kind of skipped Japan. And so America, and this is where the threat to the German forces in Lorraine come from, because America attacked the Germans in Picardia and completely wiped them out. So with Picardia solidly in Entente hands and Belgium on the verge of collapse, the entire northern German front has collapsed, and you know, Germany has those forces in Western Germany, but that is between the British and the Americans. That is not enough to hold. So in order to avoid encirclement, all those German units are unfortunately going to have to pull back from the outskirts of Paris so they don't get encircled. So that was a huge victory for the Entente. Right when Paris was being threatened, a huge breakthrough, a major breakthrough in the north, completely throws out the German victory in the south right out the window. And then the American fleet had its first action, and it sailed north to avenge the British fleet and destroyed the last remnants of the German high seas fleet. So now the Entente are the undisputed masters of the waters. There is not a single Central Power ship on the board. And then the last action of the turn was the Federal Mexicans attacked the rebel Mexicans for a 1-1 loss. So still stalemate in Mexico. And that was the turn, and that was the end of World War I. Like I said, the scenario is still not over, but in terms of major, massive fighting, that's pretty much it. So thoughts on the war and the scenario, how it went. Thought it went really well. No one was able to just steamroll over anybody. Granted, it was the third attempt. We had to reset twice because of balance issues. But I think we finally got it nailed down. Russia held out pretty good. They did better than they did historically. More or less kept Germany contained to Poland. Historically, the Germans advanced much further than just Poland, so Russia did really well in containing Germany. England and France did really well keeping Germany bottled up, and with the exception of that breakthrough in Lorraine, the Germans weren't able to advance at all in Western Germany. Excuse me, in the Western Front. Italy and Austria stalemated the entire game. There's There's a couple times where it looked like it might have went either way, but it looks like at the end of the game the Italians have the upper hand on the Austrians. Granted, a large part of that is through Allied help. Their allies sending them money through Lend-Lease, namely Japan. After Japan took out all the German positions in the Pacific, Japan pretty much turned into the Entente's bankers. The battle in the Middle East, started out pretty rocky for the British at first. The Entente were, for the first couple turns, having their way with the British, but the British, through the use of their, super weapon, the British Navy, through use of the British Navy and being able to move and land troops quickly with wherever they wanted, were able to turn the tides against the Ottomans. Granted, they only took Palestine, but if the game kept going, I think the British would begin to advance through the Ottoman territory pretty quickly. America, they weren't in it for very long, but they're only in it for 4 turns, and in terms of actual fighting, only 2 turns. But they were, I think, very crucial to the Entente, because I remember a couple videos ago, the Germans were on the verge of breaking through Bracardia, and right when the British were about to be overwhelmed, that's when the Americans showed up, and as you can see, completely reversed the situation in the northern half of the front, and completely turned it around and actually started pushing the Germans back. So it was brief, but it was, I think, extremely crucial, and for how little they were in it, I think they probably saved the Entente from total defeat. So, and so, without further ado, I think we'll get into who won. Interesting tidbit, because some of the technologies required nations to hit certain casualty thresholds, had to actually keep count of how many casualties everyone had suffered. And granted, about halfway, 3/4 of the way through the game, I didn't need to keep track anymore, but I decided to do it anyways, just out of curiosity to see, what the losses would be at the end. So the total losses for Austria lost 69 units. So that's dead and wounded. In military terms, dead and wounded are counted as casualties. So Austria lost 69 units, Germany lost 122, England lost 70, France lost 76, Russia lost 59, the Ottomans lost 31, Italy lost 44, and America lost 16. And so altogether, the Central Powers lost 222 units, and the Entente lost 265 units. So, pretty even. A 40 unit difference, that's actually a lot better than I think historically, because I think historically the Entente lost significantly more. Granted, that historically it wasn't just a 40-person difference, but each one of those infantry is roughly the equivalent of a division or a corps. So 222, that's probably a couple million if you equated it to actual numbers. So get to the who won, and keep you guys from having to wait any longer. The final tally is the Central Powers ended the war with 10 victory points, and the Entente, or the Allies, ended it with 11 points. So, close game again. Only a 1 point difference. I think what won it for the Entente is once again Russia putting up a very good fight, keeping Germany contained to only Poland, limiting Germany's points to less than half of what they could have got. And then I think the key failure was the Austrians and the Ottomans' failure to take Romania. That would have given them an extra point, and that would have, made it. That would have ended the scenario in a draw, 11-11. And then the last-minute acquisition of Palestine, gave the Entente that point. So. So the Central Powers' failure to take Romania and Russia's stubborn defense, along with England and the Commonwealth coordinating their fleets to overwhelm the Ottomans and take Palestine at the last minute. And then, of course, the very, very bloody but critical, hard-fought battle on the Western Front that tied up huge portions of Central Powers' manpower and equipment, kept it away from other fronts to allow the Entente powers to use their naval supremacy and their superior production to whittle the Central Powers down. Like I said, I think if the game continued to go, the Ottomans would collapse pretty soon. I think Italy would start dominating the Austrians, and then pretty quickly, Germany would find itself alone. And especially with England having advanced fighters now, they can finally counter the Zeppelins. So the Germany won't be able to hit London British production anymore. The convoy system and the destroyers are, taking out the German submarines. So I think if it went a couple more turns, British and Allied production would just swamp the Germans, who would probably be very quickly all by themselves as Austria and the Ottomans collapsed. So yeah, I don't know what else to say, really. Interested to hear what you guys thought about at least the World War I portion of it. Like I said, the Russian Civil War is still ongoing. The British will have to contend with the Irish Rebellion again. Mexican Civil War is still going on, so the scenario's not over yet, but the massive, world-ending fighting is over. So we'll strategy probably a little simpler than the others, because limits of technology. There wasn't really a lot of strategic options. So no bombers, no really advanced fighters. Tanks pretty primitive, so not a whole lot of options strategically, even tactically. It's pretty much just a war of attrition. Just throw as many bodies at it and try to wear the opponent down. And just overwhelm them through sheer production. So not a whole lot of critical strategy. or at least, fancy maneuver strategy. So with that, we'll sign off, and well, because the Entente or the Allies won, that means we're going to have a new nation on the board. Poland is going to be born, and it's going to go straight into war with the Soviets. So the Soviets and the Ukraine are going to be going to war with the Soviets next turn. So the Soviets are going to have quite the dilemma, the work cut out for them, because they're going to be fighting the Ukrainians, the Polish, and the White Russians. So it's going to be a three against one fight for the Soviets. So we'll see how that goes, and see if we have to make any tweaks with the Russian Civil War for balance issues. And so we'll see you then with the spring of 1919.
Hi, Axis and Allies players, and thanks for watching The Nest. Like what we're doing, go ahead and hit a squat on that like button and share it to your favorite social media. Want to see more videos just like this? Go ahead and subscribe. We'll have more coming to you right from Original Axis and Allies from Milton Bradley, Axis and Allies in 1914 by Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast, Shapeways.com, and HistoricalBoardGaming.com, where you can find all of your expansions and other pieces right there online ready for you. We'll see you next time right here, straight from the nest.